Well, hello everyone, and welcome again to Painless Universal Conversation with myself and Welsh. Today's conversation is really looking at the battle back after losing everything. Have you ever thought about your life if you lose everything? How would you get yourself back? My guest today will be telling us about his own journey, how he lost everything because of a silly thing comment he made at an event. In 1991, my guest, Gerald Ratner, came with the infamous Albert Hall speech where he said, "People say to me, how can you sell this for such a low price?" And he says, "Because it's total crap." That changed his life forever. That comment changed his life forever. Let me tell you, before we get started, a little bit about my guest. For over 30 years ago, he transformed his family's humble jewelry shop to become the largest jewelry group in the world, and then lost it all in an epic speech blunder. Who is my guest, Gerald Ratner? He was born in 1949. He was educated in Hendon County Grammar School, joined the family firm in 1965, where he transformed it to major. Gerald Ratner is a British household name. Took over his family jewelry business in 1984, which had at that time 130 stores. By the 1990s, it had over 2,500 stores, employing 25,000 employees, annual sale 1.2 billion, and profit of 120 million. Unfortunately, he went down in history. He was then chairman and chief executive of Ratner Group, the world's largest jewelry retail company, which included H. Samuel and Ernest Jones. When at corporate speaking engagement in 1991 at the Albert Hall for the Institute of Directors, he described a product of his as total crap. Right today, Gerald Ratner is very much in demand as a business speaker and has built an American business from scratch, building it over to 100 stores in the US, becoming one of the few UK retailers to succeed on the other side of the Atlantic. It was a wide up and down roller coaster ride, with Gerald talks about what has happened and how this has transpired, how he lost everything from that speech. We'll be speaking to him about this journey and how he's managed to find his joy from this pain. Meet my guest, Gerald Ratner, as he shares his story. Well, hello everyone again, and welcome to Painless Universal Conversation with myself and Welsh. As I said in my introduction, today's conversation is really one of losing everything, but how do you find your joy from your trauma, from everything that you've lost? My guest, Gerald, he will be telling us his own journey. And before we get started, I want you to understand his journey is something that he has had to live with, and he's managed to find ways to deal with it and help others who might be going through something similar. Gerald, thank you so much for joining me. I'm really honored that you took the time out of your busy schedule to be here with me to share your story. How are you today?
Yeah, I'm absolutely fine. It's a lovely sunny day in Cookham, and I've really in quite a good mood today. Sometimes, you wake up and for no good reason, you're not in a good mood, and there isn't any particular reason. People don't understand that. We're just, because we're not robots, we're human beings for no particular reason. Some days we feel good, some days we don't feel so good.
Absolutely. And I like that you said it, that people don't understand that, because sometimes that happens to me as well. I wake up in this really grumpy mood, and everyone, my family comes around, oh, mommy, what's wrong with you? And I just want to be left alone. And I love what you just said. We are human, and we tend to forget that. We tend to forget we're human. We tend to think that every day has to be the same. And that's not necessarily true, that every day has to be the same. And we need to embrace our happy times, and we also need to learn to embrace our down times. But your journey is one so really, really, when people read your story, they look back and say, wow, because what's happened to you 30 years ago is now happening, it's more common now. Yours was actually difficult to find because it was so difficult with everything. There wasn't that much social media and everything going out there. So it's almost like you were the first real person who understood the social reputational pain. But before we get started into all of that, can you tell us a little bit about who is Gerald Ratner?
Well, Gerald Ratner is a British businessman. I'm trying not to quote Wikipedia now, but I was born in 1949, November 1949, in Richmond, which is a suburb of London, and was born above a dentist shop, which hasn't really helped my teeth enormously, but anyway. And my father started business, Ratner's the Jewelers, and he built it up very successfully. I was not very successful at school. In fact, I came last in my class out of 33. And in those days, there was no such thing as trying to help a pupil or diagnose him with some sort of dyslexia or whatever you might have and try and find a reason why they weren't performing. You were actually expelled for stupidity, which is quite a tough thing when you're a child. But actually, it did me a bit of good because I think that I wanted to prove people, or prove to my headmaster who sacked me that he was wrong. So when my father got into difficulties in the business and was making losses, I felt that as I was working in the company, that I should take over because it wasn't going anywhere. It was going to be taken over and I was going to be out of a job. So I took over the business. It was quite a difficult decision because, to push my father aside, who built it up, and he was a very autocratic individual and it was his baby. But it was in his interest, and I changed the way that the business ran, and it became very, very successful. And we expanded it, and we acquired our competitors like H. Samuel, Ernest Jones, and we were expanded into America, and we were very successful there, which was unusual for a British retailer. So, I built the business into the world's largest business, jewelry business, with profits of £125 million. That was 30 years ago. And everything was going extremely well till I was invited to make a speech at the Albert Hall in 1991.
But when you look back, before we even get to that stage, as a young man, you said you didn't do very well in school. And when you look at today's young lads today, most people don't do well at school. And they all think, they really don't know what they're good at, because a lot of people are not just good at school. You transformed that. Even though you were not good at school, you were very successful in building a business. What lesson, how did you know that this was your skill, this is a gift you could do? How did you learn that?
Well, I was an observer in the business in a way, because I left school at 15 and without any qualifications, and I worked in the shop. And I'm always been good at observing and listening and copying, if you like. And I could see, working in the shop, what was successful, what sold. It's very simple: what sold, what didn't sell, which way to go, which way not to go. after working in a shop for many, and I didn't take over. I mean, I was 15 when I started in the shop, which is the best way to, to start in any business, right at the bottom, where you see the customer. And took me, good 20 years of working in that shop in all aspects of the business to actually. So when I took over, I knew which direction the business should go in. I could see what didn't work and what did work. So it wasn't just a easy, inspirational, just passionate thing. It was just something that I learned the trade over a long period of time, made a lot of mistakes. And when I took over, I realized, I knew what I was doing. I might not know about other aspects of accountancy or law or civil servants or politics, but I knew about the jewelry business because I'd been there for 20 years, and I'm good at absorbing when something interests me, unlike at school, which didn't interest me because, I wasn't interested in learning German. I wasn't interested in English literature or history, which I am now. But in those days, as a youngster, 11 years old, you just turned off. It was just, it wasn't sold to you. But yeah, when something interests me, I absorb it and remember it.
And at the age of 34, your father passed away.
No, he didn't pass away, but he was ill. He was very ill. He had a brain tumor. And this brilliant man who was very successful and also very caring and totally, this is the sadness, there's some illnesses that we can do something about, like anxiety, which I'm sure we'll come to, but there are some illnesses that are sadly hopeless. And he was in that situation where it totally changed his personality. He became very aggressive. And he also really wasn't thinking straight in any way, became a bit paranoid, and he got muddled up. And it was clear that this man who'd built this successful business couldn't carry on with it.
What was some of the sacrifice you had to do? Because you were now a youth running this business. What were some of the sacrifices? Or did you not see them as sacrifices at the time when you were building the business, really focused? And you say you guys acquired multiple businesses. You even went into America. Did you have to sacrifice as a young guy?
Well, the thing is, with somebody who's really got tunnel vision and is focused on business and wants to expand the business, they tend to do it at all costs, and everything else is pushed to one side. I'm very interested in football today, but during that period in the 80s, I wasn't interested in football. Didn't even go to I used to support Arsenal, go everywhere, not interested. And also my family life suffered. I ended up getting divorced because I was just totally driven about building that business, and it took over from everything else, which is not healthy. It's not a good thing, but it was what happened. So when I came home in the evening, after this excitement of acquiring businesses and building profits and opening shops, and I sat in front of the dinner table, it was quite mundane, it was quite dull, and I didn't really want to discuss what I thought at the time was, boring things, because my adrenaline was still going. I still wanted to sort of discuss things in business, but so that's a problem when you get totally taken over by your job.
Yes, no, absolutely. I think a lot of times we forget that we need to learn that switching off mode, and it's so difficult to switch off. And when you're back home, especially when it's your family business as well, because you want to see it succeed, you want to see it progress. Everything seems like it's on you, and this is an empire that you want to build and see it go. And then in 1991, right, came this infamous, I call it, Albert Hall speech. Why did you go there? Why did you go? Why did you decide to go there to do this speech? Can you remember what happened that day?
Yeah, I'll never forget it. Well, it was they sent me. There was no internet or emails, so I got a letter inviting me to make a speech for the annual conference of the Institute of Directors at the Albert Hall in front of 6,000 businessmen, successful businessmen. So it was quite an honor, because they would normally invite somebody who was sort of flavor of the month, if you like, a businessman who was in the news and was being successful. And it was alongside some quite important people like the Chancellor of the Exchequer. In fact, President de Klerk of South Africa was another speaker there. So I was quite honored, because I was still quite young. I was only 41, and I was, although I'd taken over 7 years ago, it was still, relatively new to the business scene, if you like. So I was quite honored to offer this. I knew it was sort of, get good publicity, because, I was in the papers quite a lot, and the publicity wasn't doing us any harm. So this was more of that. And so I accepted straight away. And then I started writing the speech. And I wanted it to be quite a serious, ironically, I wanted it to be quite a serious, statesman-like speech, if you like. It didn't work out that way.
Did you, at the time after you did the speech, you did this speech, people said to me, how could you sell this for such a low price? And you said, because it's total crap. When you're writing that in the speech, did you know that this was also going to impact the business, or did you not think anything of it, or just wanted to just sell the bit?
I certainly would never have said it if it was going to cause any damage. I mean, this was my baby. I loved it. As I said, it totally took over my life. I was driven by it. It was the most important thing. I would never do anything intentionally to damage it, obviously. In fact, I didn't even have that joke in the speech initially. It was suggested to me that I put in a couple of jokes, which was that one and the prawn sandwich joke, which is that we sell a pair of earrings for 99 pence, which is the same price as a Marks and Spencer's prawn sandwich. Yeah. But the sandwich would probably last longer than the earrings, which I probably would have got away with because it was quite funny. The sherry decanter joke wasn't even particularly funny. But anyway, I put that in just to lighten up the mood a bit. And that's all it was meant to be, a self-deprecating joke. It was put in, as I said, at the last minute. And in fact, at the Albert Hall, nobody felt anything untoward about it. But you know what the tabloids are like, and I'm not blaming them. They are what they are. They're looking for stories, and if I was the editor of the Daily Mirror or the Sun, I'd be exactly the same, disingenuous, but who cares, get a story. They said I said it about my jewelry, which is a minor point, but I accept that if you say it about one of your products, then people will, by implication, assume that everything you said is crap, and that's what everybody came. And after reading the papers the next day, that's what you would assume that I said.
Oh, wow. So, Gerald, this is now coming to do with reputational pain and losing your business pain. How did you deal with that pain when you started seeing your business crumbling down?
Well, not very well at all.
Yeah.
It was a bit like a piano player sort of having his hands chopped off, because sadly, it was something that I lived for, and I had it, had my livelihood taken away. It wasn't the money, in fact, that my shares went down from £4.20 to 2p. The fact that I lost a £850,000 a year job. It wasn't any of that. It was just the fact that I couldn't believe that over a silly joke like that, that I'd lost everything. And it was very difficult for me to take. And in fact, I cut myself off from everything. And I was sort of watching daytime TV, staying, because I'd lost my, I didn't resign, but I hired a chairman to help me, and he'd fired me. But it was inevitable after that speech. I was toast. It was inevitable. It was just, once you've made a big mistake, it's like that. you would go eventually. I hung on for 18 months, but, so it was very difficult. And in fact, I went to see a psychiatrist who put me on Prozac or something, which was not even, which actually made it worse. I mean, I'm sure it helps a lot of people, but it didn't help me, because it just put me, just when I needed to be sharp and to get back into business, I was sort of almost content about lying at home, doing nothing, giving up.
Oh, wow. And now, because this is some of the reputational pain a lot of people are going through, because just by saying one wrong thing and people taking it out of control, people spinning it for their own gain, not knowing that this person is actually a human being and how that will affect them. If you're to give a word of advice to like all these other people, because one thing we're seeing this more often now. A lot of people write because they want to sell story, not realizing people behind the scene that you're selling those story about are actually human. If you're to advise anyone, what would you say to people who just want to write for the sake of selling story, not knowing about the implication about it on the other side of it, like how it has impacted you?
Well, you're right in a way that, you know, lots of people make mistakes, because like, as we started this whole interview, that we're human beings, we're not robots. And a lot of successful people do a lot of good things, but it's inevitable that they will make mistakes. And to get, you know, like Boris Johnson at the moment, if you like, I mean, he's very successful, he's very intelligent, he made a mistake, it's inevitable he does that. And people will always want to get rid of the man at the top, or they always want to get rid of a woman at the top, the successful person. That is because not because they're offended or they're outraged by this, but because it suits them to get rid of that person, because they might feel that they might get promotion, or they might even get their job or whatever. So a lot of people are very outraged and make a whole big thing and complain about it because for their own purposes. But the advice that I would give to them is to accept that you are going to make mistakes, and you are going to get clobbered for it probably. And you meet people who have never made a mistake, have sailed through life, and there's something missing about them, a certain amount of empathy or sympathy for other people, you know. So it's helped me in a way to be part of the human race. You have to have suffered because you understand what other people are going through, and that's a good thing in a way. So, you know, if you do suffer, you might become a better human being for it, might be less arrogant, it might do you some good, and you might appreciate things, as I do, albeit my businesses today are nothing like the size of my old business, but you might appreciate things much more after losing everything, to get some of it back. But in my case, it wasn't the Prozac that helped me. In the end, it was exercise. I'm a great fan of, which I never did when I sat in the office for 12 hours a day, which doesn't make you happy. And it makes you even less happy today looking at a computer screen or your phone. So I'm a great fan of getting out into the fresh air, cycling. I know everybody says it, and walking, but the reason everybody says it is because it's true. It's, you know, it's great to be, to break off. And you also get your best ideas when you're not in the boardroom, when you've got some free time and you're out and about.
Yeah, absolutely. I totally agree, because that empathy and humanness comes from one's own pain. When you go through your struggles, it doesn't matter what it is, it makes your eyes opens up in a different way. You see things in a more sympathetic way, and you understand that even though you're trying to get your own behind the scene glory, people are human beings and people are allowed to make mistakes, and this is what makes the human race very interesting. When they said to you that you were unemployable, how did you find it in you again to start?
Well, yeah, I mean, I read that I was unemployable, which was a bit much because, you know, I'd achieved so much and all right, I'd made one mistake, but it seemed ridiculous. I was unemployable at any level. Surely I could contribute to something, but no. That was quite hurtful. You know, I got a lot of comments that were very humiliating, which I still get to this day, by the way, on Twitter. I don't get it on Facebook or LinkedIn. I get the opposite. I've just asked you, by the way, to be my friend on LinkedIn.
Oh, that's great. That's lovely.
Because I know that you'll only say nice things, but on Twitter, all they ever do is say really unpleasant things. Well, not all of them, but you know, there's a lot of abuse on that. But yeah, so I'm used to all of that sort of stuff. And when they said I was unemployable, I actually believed it, ridiculously so. So I was, as I say, I was watching daytime TV, and sometimes you need somebody to give you a kick up the backside to say you can't carry on like this, because sometimes, you know, you're in a situation where you think it's okay when it's not okay, because it's no good, however badly you've been wounded, it's no good just sort of lying around. If you're lying in the gutter, somebody will kick you, you know, you've got to get out of the gutter. And I was in that gutter situation until my wife, my second wife, threatened to actually throw me out as well after my first wife did, for the opposite reason. Because the first one was because I was never at home, and this one was because I'm always at home. So it's a bit ironic. But then she did me a favor, because I had that gun to my head, I did get out. And the thing that I did was go into the health and fitness industry because of my experience of cycling and walking during the dark days, because that was the only thing that was keeping me sane, not the pills, it was the exercise. So I could see in the late 90s the benefit psychologically as well as physically in exercise. I was completely sold on that. And then I started up a health club without any money, but it was very, very successful. I sold it for £4 million 2.5 years later, and it was a great feeling.
Gosh, I think you're just naturally gifted. You just know how to touch things and turn it into gold.
Well, some people would say the opposite. And you know, I just feel that I'm a fighter. If I do go for something, if I do really want it, nothing will stop me. And I think unless you have that approach, and there's times where nothing will stop me, even in my private life. My daughter got a bill from Vodafone for £1,500, which she couldn't pay, and she'd never used the phone to that extent, but there was obviously some fault. But Vodafone wouldn't accept this, so I phoned the chief executive of Vodafone, but he wouldn't come to the phone. But I was getting so worked up about this and so upset for my daughter that I devised a scheme how I could speak to the CEO of Vodafone, and this was that I pretended, when I phoned up, I said, his secretary answered. I got the number from his corporate website, his phone number, and his secretary answered. And I said that I was Chief Inspector Wolf from Scotland Yard. And that got me through. And when he discovered I wasn't Chief Inspector Wolf, he was actually quite relieved and quite helpful. So, you know, when I want to achieve something, I will achieve it, regardless of who I have to upset and what law I have to break.
I think that's one thing, Jan, I'd say about yourself is that, yeah, you made this one mistake, and yeah, the whole thing crumbled, and the company had to fold.
But it didn't fold, but I folded. It's carrying on today. It's actually a £3 billion company today. A lot of people think it folded, but it didn't. It's renamed Signet, but it's exactly the same business. It just doesn't have the Ratner stores in it, but it has all the other subsidiaries.
Oh, wow. Wow. Well, it's something you built and something that this will always be your legacy. What message do you have to people that have endured a fall from grace and are carrying on with this weight of the reputational pain? What message would you give to anyone who's going through this pain right now?
Well, I can look myself in the mirror. I know that I made a mistake, but I'm not ashamed of myself. I feel that, you know, I've achieved a lot. I've made a lot of mistakes. I'm a human being. I behave in a decent way to people and to animals, more importantly. My case, I have a special love for dogs and stuff like that. And I'm liked by my friends and my relatives. I'm disliked by a certain Twitterati who don't know me, who just look at that one speech and say that I'm arrogant, I make fun of my customers, you know, that I'm an idiot and all that sort of stuff, but they don't know me. They don't know me. Yes, I made a mistake, as they have probably done in their lives. But, you know, as long as you can like yourself in a way, yeah, and not feel guilty and feel that you've done your best, then you'll wake up in the morning and you might not be the richest person anymore because you've lost a lot because of it, or you might not have the important job anymore because you've lost it. But you can look yourself in the mirror and you think, well, I'm a decent bloke or I'm a decent woman, and people can take it or leave it the way it is. I'm not here to try and to win a popularity contest with people who you will never change. You know, there are certain idiots out there. You get these racists in football grounds, which they try and do Black Lives Matter, and they try and convince. You'll never change these people because they're basically stupid idiots. And that's always, but that's not a big percentage of the population. It's 0.001%. You'll always get that. Yes. They are, and they're probably really bitter because their own lives are a mess. So they don't want anyone else to be happy. So you're never going to change that. Just let them get on and abuse you and do that stuff. You can't educate them. You can't talk to them. You can't convince them. They are what they are, you know. And people just, they're just some people in the world that are just awful.
I noticed now you mentor a lot of businesses. You tell them message how to run their successful business. What is that people, when you go to businesses and you talk to them, what do you feel that people most need, especially CEOs or leaders of companies, to be mentored to help them, especially with the fast-paced decade we're living in, where things are constantly changing and where in a second now, more than your day before, in a second now, anything could be lost. What kind of message do you give to businesses now?
Well, I'm unusual. I do a lot of mentoring, you're quite right. And I love helping people and I travel all over the world. Well, I did do up until the pandemic. Hopefully I'm starting to do it again now. I'm really appreciated what I missed, because helping people, kindness, I heard in a podcast, is the antidote to anxiety. It's not actually relaxation or sitting eating a good meal. It's actually being kind, which actually helps deal with, you know, your own problems as well. And I'm unusual in terms of giving people mentoring, which is not purely 100% business, like price this at this or acquire this business or expand here or buy this property. It's not all about that. It's my experience that by just quite continually acquiring and self-gratification and wanting more and more and more doesn't actually make you happy. So if you're on this, I don't like to use the word journey of life, it's not all about being successful in business, because a lot of people that I've known, including myself, that are very successful in business, doesn't actually make you happy. It's a mixture of things. Yes, money's great, but you know, you must control you. It's not by you'll never have enough money. So just accept that if you've got some, you need some to make you happy and to get things you want. But there's other things that have to you have to smell the roses. You have to enjoy your success. You don't have to complete, because there'll always be somebody doing better than you, your competitor. You'll never be the best at everything. So just, so I sort of try and mentor people into try and being happy with what they've achieved, not only just achieving things. And it's often the case that you just have another person's view that doesn't have a hidden agenda. The problem with business people getting advice is they're getting it, as I discussed with you before about trying to get rid of people. People often give you advice, whether it's private or with business. They give you advice to suit them, not to suit them. So if you go down that will be good for them if you make that decision. They don't actually give you, but I, as a mentor, give totally independent advice. I'm not going to benefit or anything by them making that decision. So I will give them the harsh reality of where I feel they should go.
My final question, Gerald, before I let you go, because honestly, I could talk to you for hours all day and just learn your experience, but I have to come to this final question. What gives you joy now when you look back at everything, your life, the way your life has gone? You've been to 2 divorces, but each of them were different. One was because you were working too hard, the other one was because you're staying at home too much. Then you went through this downward spiral with your company and you lost it all, but you still managed to turn things around, and you're sitting here, you're still humble, you're more successful in richness in other ways. What would be your message of hope to and what gives you joy in your day-to-day life?
Well, things that gives me joy and pleasure, in the end, annoyingly, are not the expensive things, not the ridiculously expensive cars or holidays or jets and all those sort of things that I had. Not that I can afford them anymore, but they were not the things that ever gave you any pleasure. Annoyingly, at the end of the day, it is the simple things that just give you pleasure. Just the fact that I have survived, that I wake up and I can go for a lovely walk in the country. I'm lucky enough to live near the river and walk along the river, listening to one of your podcasts or something like that, and just relaxing and not having the stress that I've had before, and realizing that I don't have to drive myself into the ground, that I can get up, go for a cycle and enjoy life. And the problem with a lot of us is that we're so busy thinking that we have to make a lot of money, or we have to socialize a whole lot. We're under so much pressure that we're not actually enjoying the simple things in life. And it is those simple things that do make you happy.
Gerald, this is really, I'm really honored to have this conversation, because I think you've just brought the message. I think for 2022, a lot of people might be staying there and they want to start, they want to be in the year with lots of, they have this massive goals, but at the end of the day, what really is truly important is, first you have to love yourself and make time for yourself as well, because in a second, material things could go away, but what will always be there is you. And I really get that message from you.
That's very well put. You put it much better than I put it, actually, but you're absolutely right. And it's been a pleasure talking to you, and thanks so much for inviting me onto your show.